every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern in the United States, which translates to evening time in Europe, and early Saturday, or really late Friday, early Saturday in Asia Pacific. So excited to have everyone here today. Thanks for joining. For those of you watching live and/or those of you listening or watching after the fact, we're streaming live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and of course Crowdcast is where we're actually broadcasting from. So there's a handful of people watching on Crowdcast today as well. So what we're going to do here is we introduce our guest here in just a second. But before I do that, I want to encourage people to ask questions at any point. We're going to be talking today about consulting, careers in consulting in general. And we've got a consultant here who I'll introduce here in a minute that's going to answer some questions about being a consultant and the pros and cons, the good, bad, the ugly about being a consultant. And this should be a good conversation for those of you that are already in consulting, maybe thinking about consulting, maybe you're thinking of hiring a consultant, you want to know what it's like or what to expect from consultants. So it's a pretty broad audience that we're trying to appeal here to today. So before we get started, those of you watching live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, if you don't mind, just drop in the chat box where you're listening in from today. I'd love to see where the audience is from, where in the world are you at, what city are you in, what country are you in. I'd love to know a little bit more about you all here in the audience. So those of you that don't know, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm. We help clients with digital transformations and business transformations. And today's guest is Kameron Carpenter, who is a consultant, senior consultant on the Third Stage team, and has been with the company now for some time. So Kameron, welcome to the show here today.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody. And I'm happy to be on the show. So I guess I could give a little background if you want on who I am, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, Kameron Carpenter, I'm a consultant for Third Stage. I've diverse background and experience, and I've really honed in on the consulting side and in the digital transformation projects that we run. A lot of selections, change management, implementation readiness in a diverse span of industries, from non-for-profits, HCM, all the way through to different types of manufacturing clients, large manufacturers of steel, glass, med devices, complexities in the A&D side with compliance and regulatory requirements. So I've just gotten all kinds of different projects over the last 2.5, 3 years working with Third Stage. And a little more about me: I bring a diverse background experience with my military background. I've been in over 11 years now in the Air National Guard, working more on the maintenance, repair, overhaul side. So thanks for having me, and very excited to be a part of the interview today.
Yeah, thanks for being here today. It's great to have you here. And now, I guess to start, what you started to talk a little bit about your background, but I want to dive into that a little bit in terms of just understanding how you got into consulting. What is it that it drew you to it? How did you get involved? Maybe how did you get started?
So I would say I got my degree in management, the focus in entrepreneurship, and I just had a big interest in entrepreneurialism and really how businesses operate and run. It just amazes me what people can do and accomplish, and I'm always intrigued at how they got to where they are. And so I started looking for a career, and I think what I did was I started to talk to industry leaders such as yourself, individuals like yourself, Eric, and started to ask questions about the different career options. And I was lucky enough to be introduced into the world of consulting, and lucky enough to get a career here at Third Stage where I could jump in and start this career path. So it was a quick jump right into the industry, and it was a lot to take on, but happy I got here. So.
Yeah, me too. And you and I had kind of a loose family connection, not a loose family connection, but friends of family sort of a connection. Yeah. And that's when you and I first met while you were still, I can't remember if you were in college or maybe you just finished college. Was the first time we had met. And then.
I don't think I'd finished college yet. I think it was actually a few years after when I kind of just was talking with you, kind of reaching out. I just started traveling the country after I graduated with my wife, and we went all over from the East to West Coast, she's a travel nurse, and I worked multiple different industries, mainly in the service industry and others, contracting work as far as residential construction, masonry, that kind of thing. So a pretty manual background before I got to where I am, and happy for the networking and the family history there. So
yeah, I think some of that non-consulting background, that direct industry experience, that gives you a different perspective than a lot of people, that haven't actually been sort of in the trenches doing some of the work that you've done.
Yeah, it's different, right? You feel that you have these, I don't know what you would call them, attributes to yourself, or things that that you can do certain things, but you got to find somebody who can see that aspect of you and be willing to take the chance on you. And it's very hard for young individuals coming into the consulting world, I would think, because they're just looking for people with a certain amount of experience that just isn't always out there. And so I was just very thankful that that I was able to have a conversation, and that you were open to, taking on somebody and challenging them that wasn't specifically in the consulting industry to begin with. So,
yeah. So I guess, I'll go off script from the start. I know we've got a list of questions we were going to start with here, and I already have a question that isn't on the script, but that sort of triggered it a little bit, in that, when you go from, just starting out in your career, kind of going from being a recent college grad into consulting, what was that adjustment like? I mean, how would you describe it?
That's a loaded question.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say to this.
I mean, everybody throws the term around, right? Drinking from the fire hose. And even now I'm still drinking from the fire hose, and it's been 2.5-3 years later. So that transition was just, physically it was difficult because I was working at a computer more frequently and in desk type work, but the travel was nice, and getting to go on site and see clients. So that part was challenging for me, but I think the workload, there's just so much information and things that come right at you, and you have to pick apart it all and put together the dots really quickly to turn it around and provide reasonable information back to the clients, right? And so I adapted quickly, but it took a minute to understand how I was going to take everything I was learning and use that, right? So that was the challenge, I would think. But
yeah, if it's any consolation, I've been doing this 25 years, and I still feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose. Anytime we have a new client, in fact, I just flew back. We were talking before we came on the air here just a few minutes ago, and I was telling you how I just flew back from a client earlier today on the eastern United States, and it was just a massive amount of information. It was almost information overload, right? I felt like, and part of it's because doing it in person, is a little bit different than the Zoom stuff that we've grown accustomed to in the last year and a half during the pandemic. But it's also because in consulting, it seems like you just never, you never have all the answers, or at least you shouldn't have all the answers. And every business is so different. Every time you have a new client, it's a different business model, different strategy, different people, different culture, different operations. I mean, everything's so different that you've got to learn it all. It's like starting over every time you have a new client or a new product.
Yes.
So good news, bad news, I guess.
It's good and bad. You have to, that's part of the being a consultant though, right? Adapting quickly. And I think we'll get to that a little bit more, but it's just, that's the challenge, learning that and overcoming that, and how you can turn that around into something useful for clients. So
yeah, absolutely. So based on what you're doing so far, first of all, how long have you been at Third Stage now? It's been about 2 years, or it's been more than that, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been more, because it was February-ish 2019. So I'll be at 3 in February total. I'm not keeping track.
You're an old pro. 2.5 years in, you're becoming a pro. You seem like a pro.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. So on selection projects.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to learn on the implementation side, change management. There's always more you can learn along those lines. But when you think about the last 2.5 years and the types of work you've done and the client engagements you've been involved with, what do you like most about it? I mean, what are the things that appeal to you?
Well, first off, it was learning about a business from end to end. It's just really cool to see all the different industries and the different operations, some that are similar, but so much different, right? And how are they doing what they do, and how do they make money? It's just amazing to see that. Manufacturing is the coolest side to see for me. But I think the other one too, some of the cooler things I've seen are hearing about those client stories for where, it's a third, fourth generation CEO, owner of the company, and they started sweeping floors and then working their way up through the industry all the way up into running the business. And it's just, you get to hear a lot of cool stories like that. And I think that that's one big thing that I really enjoy about these projects and the work that we do is the diversity of clients that we have and what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say? You may have alluded to this a little bit in when you're talking about the adjustment or the transition from recent college grad into consulting. But what did you find to be the biggest challenges then? So you talk about what you like best about learning all this new stuff, but what are the biggest challenges been, or the things you like least about it?
Challenges are like least about it. Well, I'm supposed to say that my favorite part's writing requirements, right? Documenting.
That's the best part of any project.
No, I'd say what's challenging, I think, is and you have to have the skill set to do it, but it's being able to adjust quickly and adapting to the client and their needs, right? You get into nothing is fully routine. You might have an approach to selection or change management and implementation readiness. There's generally guidelines, but everybody is so different that you have to be able to adjust and adapt to their needs, whether that's providing little or less information and being concise, or getting them more detail into information they need to help make good decisions. So it's the clients are the challenge, but that's what we do this work for that challenge. So yeah, I don't know, dislike, hard to say dislikes. I mean, if you get one or two clients that are constantly questioning you, I think that's a positive, but that can come in line with having, different sets of opinions and alignment as far as the individuals themselves and how they work well together. And it might just be a matter of the team structure and needing to adjust. That could be challenging, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. That's a good reminder that I think sometimes consultants forget that, our job as consultants is to go into difficult situations. And so by nature or by definition, you're going to deal with some personality tensions and pressure and stress and things that you get blamed for. You're going in to help fix the problem that client couldn't solve themselves. So inherently it's not going to be an easy walk in the park, especially with the type of work we do with, digital transformation, business transformation, change in general. That's harder for any organization. So we end up being the recipients of the stress and pressure. And so a lot of times I always tell new consultants, especially even some veteran ones that forget this really important point that, half of our job is to be sort of like a therapist and listen and just understand that, Cameron's stressed out, going through change. Cameron's got, he's got a bullseye on him. If the project fails, he's going to lose his job. And, he's got family pressures as well and other stuff going on. So, it's just relating and empathizing with what the client's going through. It's easy to take it personally and forget. That's why we're there.
Yes. Don't take things personally. You got to step yourself back and put yourself in their shoes. We just had a client and I had a recent client and they had a failed implementation, really didn't meet their needs. They didn't assess and look, properly assess the vendors in the marketplace. And there were a lot of major gaps, and that's a lot of time and effort and energy spent that, now working with us to come in and vet this solution, right? Or when we worked with them is kind of questioning the steps and what we're doing, why we're doing certain things, which is understandable though, because they want to make sure that they're making the right decision for their company. So,
And it's, and when you're doing a software selection, it's a big decision. When you're helping manage the implementation, it's a big implementation, it's a big change. So there's a lot of, just inherently, there's going to be a lot of stress in those situations, and a lot of people aren't ready for that, in the world of consulting.
Yes, a lot of stress.
So, yeah. So of the work you do at Third Stage, I know you were talking about how a lot of the work you've done on clients over the last 2.5 years has been focused on software evaluation selections or that digital strategy and roadmap piece of it. Um, but you're also, I know you've dabbled in other areas and you've continued to expand your skill set. Based on what you've done so far, what type of work do you like best so far, and why? What do you like best about it?
Uh, um, I do actually like specifically to the tasks that I'm typically doing. I really enjoyed the workshops, digging into the process, um, and what the clients are doing and how they're doing it, and getting to see the operations, actually physically seeing it, going through usually plant tours and seeing how the job is done. I think being able to get that perspective along with running through these workshops from all these different stakeholders in the business helps to give you that true picture that you need. Because without that, I don't think that you can do multiple steps in the process or project and help guide and advise them, from either selections, change management, implementation readiness, or even from an implementation perspective, not knowing or understanding the complexities of the company and their needs as far as the organ, moving forward in a very large project that's usually costly and time consuming. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point that, in consulting, a lot of times, you'll have different areas of focus and, our team tends to be a little bit more broad and cross-functional in terms of not just being experts in one area, but really trying to understand the entire big picture of a digital transformation. But a lot of consultants will focus on one work stream or one part of a transformation, like technology, for example. There's system architects or data migration experts or hands-on technical configuration experts, whatever the case may be, or even change management experts. You think about all these things that may seem like they don't have a lot to do with the operational side or really understanding the business needs because you're focused on the technology, the change management, or whatever it is. But I think you have a really good point, which is you have to understand, no matter what you do and where you're focused, you do have to understand how the business works, or you should understand how the business works and how you're going to help improve it. And I think that's another thing that consultants side of they focus too much on what the technology can or can't do, and they don't pay enough attention to what the client is doing. And there's some good reasons why they do the stuff they do, even if it's broken or inefficient. And,
right.
That's an important point.
And as an advisor, I think it's a cool part of the work that we do too is helping to present the information for the individuals we're working with, to make big decisions on. Right. So we're here. I'm usually here to make someone else look really good and to help them, give them the information and the details they need to make the best decisions that they can for their organization. So I think that's very enjoyable. It's very fun to work with all the different leaders in the industry, and I think that's a big part of the work that we do. The work is I've gotten to work with top leaders, executives, CEOs, C-level suite, and have gotten a completely different perspective that I probably wouldn't have gotten going elsewhere, starting off, in a different career field.
Yeah. Yeah. I started off in consulting as well. And I remember feeling like there was sort of an immediate credibility you have just because you're a consultant. Doesn't matter what you do or don't know or how smart you are or aren't. It's just like you're a consultant. So you have this immediate perceived credibility, which can help, but it could also be tricky, especially early in your career. And maybe I'll come back to that. To that point.
We will come back to that. I was going to say it's key is being resourceful.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that now, actually, while we're on it, because I might forget, honestly, and we might go a different direction. But that's an interesting point that I wasn't planning on asking about. But how do you starting off, especially where you're at right now, or even a year or two ago when you were first starting out. I can't help but compare you now to where I was, obviously when I started out around the same age in consulting. I remember people looking at me and sort of looking at me funny and saying, you're really young, like you're younger than my kids. And, I've been working at this company for longer than you've been alive. How are you going to help me? How can you, Mr. 25, 26-year-old, how are you possibly going to help me run my business better or improve? So, has that happened to you? And how have you navigated that issue, especially you, because you look younger than you are, even though you are young, you look even younger than you actually are. So I imagine that might be
First off, grow some scruff, and it'll make you look a little bit older. That helps.
Yeah, that's what I did. Especially when you've got gray in the scruff,
Yeah.
that helps.
I'm working on those now. I have a daughter, so
That'll do it.
Yeah. I have ran in. It hasn't been directly hit towards me because we structure our project team so well that we have knowledge in industry experience from multiples. Is that I don't act like I know something that I don't know, and I get the information I need from the individuals I need to. I'll lean on that experienced team member. I obviously in situations where I have to answer certain questions, and I think just from my experience in over the last 2.5 years has helped me to be able to guide and answer certain questions for clients, right? But I think I'm trying to think if there was ever. I think it was maybe the first. Like I said, project structure is key in having the right team members with you. It was one of my first projects I was on, and someone started to ask me about Dynamics 365 versus another software product, and I had not known much about either product line or releases for those product lines, right? And thankfully, I had 2 other senior individuals right behind me, heard the question, and they just turned and jumped right on in. So I think that's key, is finding a good team that's always going to be there to support you. You're not going to always be shielded, and you need to be able to don't lie about something. You know, if you don't know, you don't know, but I can get the answer for you. So
yeah,
not a good example. I'm trying to think of some, and I honestly don't feel like I've been painted into a corner ever for age or anything other than maybe them calling out my age.
Right.
So
or someone on our own team giving you a hard time about your age. That happens sometimes too. I've been guilty of that, as I already have been in this interview at least once. So
I mean, there's internal challenges that comes with age, I think. With any team structure, that this might be a different conversation, but don't know if we want to dive into it or not.
Well, you have a good point though about the team, relying on a team, especially at that point in your career, making sure you're not letting yourself get in too far over your head or pretending to know something you don't.
Right.
And it's still, even like I said, 25 years later, it still happens to me too, where someone will say, what are your thoughts on the newest release of whatever software? And, sometimes I didn't even know there was a new release, and, they're asking me what my thoughts are of certain functionality within the system. And, no one of us is going to know everything about everything out there, as much as I'd love to think someday we might, or all of us might, but it's just not going to happen. Stuff's changing too quickly for any one person to know it all.
Absolutely.
So that team approach is always important, for sure.
Yes.
So what are do you have 1 or 2 examples of client projects that you've worked on in the last couple of years that you've enjoyed the most, like ones that just stand out as you liked it best because of either the type of work you were doing, you like the people, or you like the industry, the company, or all the above?
It's all the above, but I have a lot of great projects. I think there's 2 specific ones that are just popping into my head right away. I mean, I obviously enjoy some of the individual ones I ran and did selections for myself. And then my first project, I always look back to that one. It was a great, very large client. I'm very lucky to be on that project. Large manufacturer steel products, right? Stateside. And that project team was awesome. And actually my other experience that I was going to bring up is with the same project team, these project manager on it. But so there's a trend there, I think. What a cool industry. They had a lot of cool people. They were just diving deep into conversation. They were super complex. I jumped into a very hard project, and it was just everything coming at you a mile a minute. I mean, it was, multi-location, multi-site, and then all the divisional differences of the different locations across the country, right? So now you got to take all this information, conceptually compile it into other detailed deliverables to help drive towards a successful project, and not knowing what you're doing. So I think that client in particular was just such a great client that my experience was great, even though I had the challenges of learning everything, right? So very fortunate there. Plus, I had a team project manager that really helped and guided me through a lot of it, and took the time to help me. So that was it was the experience and the client. And the second client that comes to mind and is pretty recent is just awesome engineering to order company. And I think you're seeing a trend in manufacturing. It's more my favorite, more of my niche area I like to work in. But they were just, we culturally meshed well together. We got along. We got to know the client very well. And I think we built a lot of trust and communicated well from the front end all the way through the project, that it just everything worked out the way it was supposed to. We worked through the deliverables. We worked through vetting out another software solution, and we provided a lot of value to them, and they resonated that back to us. And I think when you get that validation from clients and how grateful they are for what you were able to do and work with them on, it just sets them apart from the rest. Really does. So, but
yeah. Those are two cool examples, and I know you've been involved with some international clients as well, and
yep.
We actually have, speaking of international, we have just some responses from people where they're listening in from today. We've got people someone in Prague, Netherlands, Cleveland, Ohio, UK. So a lot of different people throughout the world that are listening live here through the discussion. And actually, we have our first question from the audience over on LinkedIn. Actually, is where the first question comes from. And that question is from Rashid, who's an Odoo developer on LinkedIn. And he asks, hello, folks. As consultants and managers, did you learn people skills along the way? And Dale Carnegie wrote a wonderful book about it. But I guess just to hone in on the question, did you learn people skills along the way? And maybe talk about what are some of those people skills that are important as a consultant?
To be honest, I think that, and Eric, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the skill set that stood out for me was that I was able to communicate and talk well with people and just to build relationships. And I think that's just one big skill set that a consultant can have. It's not the end all be all. Being optimistic, being outgoing, I think it's very helpful, especially when you can take information from different key players, from IT to end users to the executive level, and communicate it at different levels. Those are traits and kind of things that you can build on when you get into the field. Lean on those industry leaders to help guide you to hone in on your skills and get better. But I think some people just naturally have those people skills. And if you have those people, utilize them, right? There's certain things that I'm not going to do just because that's not what I do. I'm not going to go code software because I'm not going to do that. But I think that there is a level where you can start to hone in on some of those skills and get better at it.
Yeah. How would you describe the people skills that you think are most important? Just more in terms of like maybe not so much from a change management perspective as a discipline, but just more as a basic people skill as a consultant. Yeah. What do you think is important on that front?
I think it's listening. If you can listen and understand truly where someone's coming from, and then either reiterate that back to them in a different way or somewhere where you get confirmation from them, I think is a big skill to have. You need to understand and assess the situations that you're in, especially with the different key players that you'll be working with on very complex projects, because you're balancing information from end users to C-level, and the decisions from the top might not resonate with those from the bottom. And so you have to understand who you're speaking to, and know when to say certain things. And I don't know if there's a good way to build that skill other than be thrown into it, being around individuals that are really good at it, letting them do the talking first and kind of understanding how they would handle certain situations.
Yeah, that's well stated. And I think the listening, if I had to pick one thing that's most important to being a good consultant, I'd say it's listening. In fact, I'll take someone who's not as smart but listens really well as someone who's really smart doesn't listen or thinks they have all the answers. And, on paper, you may think the latter is going to be the better consultant because they have more answers or they're smarter or whatever. But I think it's overrated. And not to say you can't be completely clueless. I mean, you have to sort of know what you're doing, and you have to be certainly leaps and bounds ahead of where your clients are, but you don't need to be the smartest, especially if you have those people skills and those soft skills, or what I sometimes refer to as finesse. There's a certain finesse and an art to being a good consultant, and it's super hard to teach, but it's easy to spot. And that's actually something I saw in you before we ever, talked about you being a consultant. I just noticed your interpersonal skills were so strong. I felt like you would be a really good consultant if you wanted to be. And thankfully you wanted to be. So that's good. You were able to make that jump and translate those skills into consulting.
Yes. And I appreciate it, because if it wasn't for that observation, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I did, people would ask like, well, what did you, college kid? I mean, how do you know someone that's in college that has never done consulting? How do you know they're going to be a good consulting? You never really know for sure, but it's those, like you said, it's the listening, the empathy, understanding, and you pick that up in a personal conversation. You can pick that up just as easily talking to someone about family stuff, as easily as you could talking about business or operations or whatever. So usually it's pretty transferable. So for those of you that are trying to build a good consulting team, or you're trying to figure out how to be a good consultant, I don't know if you can necessarily learn those soft skills or the people skills or the finesse, but I think it's something you can develop, and it's a muscle you can build over time to really try to listen more and talk less. I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give to a lot of consultants, especially as you get later in your career. I think you have a tendency, myself included, you tend to want to talk more, listen less, and you want to keep that flipped and listen a lot more than you're talking, no matter how much you know. Even if you think you have the answer, even if you're right and you have all the answers, it's better to sit back and listen. So if you're in a situation where you have someone who's maybe interested in moving into consulting, either they're early in their careers, just out of college, or maybe they're mid-career and they've been doing something else. They've been working internally at an organization, and they're thinking about making a leap to consulting. What advice would you give them? Like, how would you suggest someone get started, or how would they explore the world of consulting or prepare to be a good consultant?
Okay. I think if you're considering taking a leap into this world, you need to start talking to people in this world. You need to ask them the pros and cons of consulting, what the work-life balance is. Make sure you're looking at a firm that's doing projects somewhere to what you want to be doing, that they resonate with your core values as an individual as well. Because there's so many different roles in consulting, from an independent agnostic consulting firm such as Third Stage to working for a vendor or partner of a vendor in consulting on software, and the latter. I mean, the list goes on and on. So do your due diligence, and honestly, I think networking is key. Talking to people in the industry and where you're interested, and then making an educated decision based on that. Right, finding the right job, because you're already in a career field and you're already maybe you're experienced, and you're now want to take that experience and use it elsewhere, which would be great, because individuals like me get to take your 20 plus years experience and learn from it very quickly, such like reading a book. Right. But for younger ones, just dive in, and don't look back. Once you make that leap and you get in, keep making the leap, even internally. Make sure you're always trying to jump on something new, learn something new, asking lots of questions. I think I ask 1,000 questions a day to one person alone, let alone everybody else on our team. So don't ever stop wanting more. Always keep leaping.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of alluded to this. You didn't use these words, but it triggered a thought, as it relates to your personality, as well as what I think our team exhibits and what I think good consultants exhibit, which is that humble nature, to be able to know, first of all, to be self-aware enough to know that I don't have all the answers. And even if I think I have the answer, I might want to validate it. I might want to bounce it off someone else. I might want to brainstorm with others just to get, make sure either I'm thinking about this right, or maybe someone can help me make it an even better thought or analysis of whatever I'm thinking. So that humble nature, the inquisitive question asking that you allude to, I think those are both really good points that are sort of that finesse piece that I was talking about. It's hard to teach that, but you can focus on it. You can be mindful of that, as you're thinking about consulting or just being a good consultant.
Well, you just made me think of something too that's key. If you're going to leap into the consulting world, find a company that has the right company culture. And I'm thankful, Eric, for the company that the way you set our structure and culture it's amazing the type of individuals we get to work with and the flexibility and their willingness to help you learn and grow when you're in this consulting role. So the right consulting company with the right culture can make or break your experience.
Yeah. It's a great point. And that comes from, I appreciate you saying that my focus on that comes from having messed it up before, my last company. So I try not to, I don't hide that fact that I did not focus on culture in the first consulting company I started, and it created a very toxic, cancerous, negative culture, and people didn't want to be there. People didn't like it, myself included. It got to the point where I just didn't want to be there. And it was so hard to change, and especially with different ownership and whatnot over time. But you get it right from the start, and you get a good culture. You find that firm that has that good culture, you're just going to be more excited about doing the work. And you think about being in the trenches with consultants, traveling, you're going to unusual places that you're not familiar with, you're dealing with different personalities. We talked before about how you're absorbing the stress of your clients, and it's a pretty stressful job. I mean, it's not, I think people think it's more glamorous than it is. It's hard work. I mean, it's a pretty gritty job. I think, especially for a white collar job, it's pretty gritty. And, so I think you want to be around people you like when you're in the trenches. I know you've got a military background too, and I suspect there's something there. I don't have a military background, but so correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that's something that might translate or that you might relate to in the military if you're, not that you've been at war, but if you think about potentially getting deployed or going to war, you want to be with people you like and that you trust and that have your back, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. We have a good team of people that I know that if I need something or if I need help, they're there. They can fill my role in my spot and take over, without missing a beat. And so we have that flexibility and that capability because we work well as a team. Plus, culture is good, and the normal hazing is always going to be there. So, got to have a little fun with it too. So.
Right. Well, you were our first, you weren't inexperienced, but you were our first more junior hire, as a company. So I think you probably got the brunt of the hazing because of that. And hopefully, it's all in good fun.
Oh yeah. That's why I'm the hugger. We won't go into details there though.
Right. So I've heard. So what about, when you think about the fact that, consulting is not for everyone, we've talked about some of the good stuff and, some of the stuff that could be difficult or challenging, or maybe things that we don't always like about consulting, but what are some signs or characteristics or personality traits that you would say would indicate that maybe you're not a good fit for consulting? Because I think that's just as important as knowing you're a good fit. You also want to know when you're not a good fit for something, and you kind of want to rule that out, or at least know that maybe you want to dig deeper to understand it before you commit to going in that direction. What are some of those personality traits that you'd say that may create some additional stress or dislike of this profession?
Well, first off, just generally, if you like a normal 9 to 5, off on the weekends, your 2-week vacation, like, this isn't the career for you. And I don't mean it in a harsh way, right? But there is flexibility, I think, in this, and we do have a good work-life balance with the structure that we've set up with Third Stage. But when you're working projects and with clients, they're hiring you as the experts to come in, and you only have a certain period of time to get something done. You got to get it done. If it's working Saturday, Sunday, a couple 100-hour weeks, 50, 60, up to 100-hour weeks, just to knock out some project tasks to make sure we're meeting the deadline. So that's just what has to happen. At the end of the day, we're here to support our clients, and you got to be there for them. They expect us to be there. So just, it's not a normal work environment, I think. So if you want that, you're not going to have that. Because I'm trying to think of like actual personality traits, but like, I think you need to really be able to work. I don't know what I would call them, but characteristics are like you need to be optimistic, you need to be you need to be yeah, I guess when you start to play uh, the role of therapist, you need to be able to um, relate to people, and I think that's a big one. Um, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Uh, yeah, because, and that's why entrepreneurial studies was fun for me. It's a lot of work, and things are changing quickly. You have to adapt and adjust, and uh, in this world, nothing's the same. You might do a similar project or task, but every client's so different, complex. You're in, with that fire hose of information coming at you. You're always adapting and adjusting to what you need to do to make a successful project for a client.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're, maybe to add to that, if you are someone that likes a super predictable environment, not just the hours like you were saying, 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but even just day to day, tell me what to do, tell me what the answer is, or tell me how to do it. So much of what we do is, as much as we have our methodologies, our tool sets, our frameworks, it's constantly evolving and improving. There's still every day you get new clients, different situations that you haven't seen before, but we've seen so many other situations that we can apply and mold a certain approach or framework to different situations. But you have to be comfortable with that ambiguity, knowing that there's a lot of gray in consulting. It's not black and white.
Yep. No, I think that's really the biggest one. I mean, it's not a normal work environment. It can get stressful, and it can be a lot. You can be traveling, working multiple clients, and there's a lot of complexity to working multiple clients and traveling. I mean, there's, so there you go. Just balance. You need to be motivated, and you need to be able to go the extra mile, and disciplined. I think discipline's a big one, because a lot of times it's on your schedule to get what you need to get done, and you're the one that has to make yourself wake up every day and do it. So
right, yeah, and also, one of the smaller, finer points of being a consultant is that generally consultants are paid a lot of money. Maybe as individuals are not necessarily, they're not making all the money that's getting billed, but the client is paying a lot of money for your services. And, they see that invoice every month, and they see the line item that says Kameron Carpenter, X $1,000 for X number of hours. And so it's very clear how much you and other consultants, all of us, are charging per hour. And so there's just a higher level of expectations that go along with that. And so, you talk about discipline. One thing that came to mind as you were saying that is just the little things of, like, not following up when you said you would, or missing little details, or being a little sloppy or loose with your deliverables. That stuff can work fine in a normal, bigger organization, especially, but in consulting, you've got to, everything you do is sort of watch very closely, not in a distrustful kind of way necessarily, but just more of a prove your value kind of a way, and prove that invoice I just got. I need to see that value from you every day and every little thing you do. So that you have to be comfortable with that, and you have to be willing to deliver to that, because that's right, where a lot of consultants fall down or fall flat.
Yes. No, accept the challenge.
Right. So a couple other questions coming in here on LinkedIn. I'll ask you this question. You can pass on this if you want, and I'll try to take a stab at it. But I would be curious to hear see what you think, if you have a thought on this. But question is from Chalita. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Chalita or Shalita on LinkedIn, and the question is, how did you cultivate that good company culture? What specifics did you seed? And maybe I'll ask you that perspective, if you have an answer, from the perspective of what you saw or what you see in terms of how we've built a culture. I mean, what are your observations about the culture, and what in particular is good about it? You started to talk a little bit about it, but maybe you could go deeper into what you like about it, or what you think makes it a good culture.
Well, I think essentially you're drawing the right people in because of the vision of our organization and what we do, and our focus on our clients, and that we're agnostic. We're here to help them. So I think that's a big start, is how we represent ourselves as an organization, and what we're doing for our clients. And we hold true to that. Everybody that comes on, always is speaking about our agnostic approach to working for clients, right, and not having any ties in any industry to any vendors. And I think that is a big key to the type of individuals that come here, because they're here wanting to help clients. With that being said, too, I think that was a big part of the culture, is essentially assessing those individuals and hiring on individuals that work well as a team, right? I think there's certain traits of individuals I'm seeing that are consistently being hired across the board. And I don't know what the criteria is from that end. I can only say for what it would potentially look like based on who I'm working with, and it does. So essentially, I think it's our vision that drives the culture, and then our team mentality.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up an interesting thought, or something that I have in the back of my mind whenever I interview people. And part of what we've done with the culture here is that, first of all, we have a team-based recruiting approach. And so, I still interview every person we hire, no matter, what level they're at. And that's not sustainable long term, but it's enough to get us to 40 people where we're at now. I anticipate doing that for the near future as long as I can, because I think it's so important. Not because I'm the sole arbitrator or the sole, I'm the only person that knows whether or not they're a good fit, but I know what kind of company I want us to be. I have a very clear vision of that, just because I messed it up at the last company. So I sort of did a 180 on that approach that I took at the old company. But one of the litmus tests I always ask myself, and I do it literally every time I interview someone, is as I'm talking, I'm listening for substance. I'm looking for those little things, the raw skills you look for in a consultant. But I also ask myself, if I'm traveling with this person and I get stuck at an airport for, 4 hours because of a weather delay, which has happened to all of us in consulting, and I'm, at a bar or restaurant in the airport, just stranded with this person, is that going to be a good time for me? Am I going to enjoy that time, or is it going to be a drag? Is it going to be like a, not tension, but, just something that's not going to be enjoyable for me? And it sounds somewhat judgmental, and it is pretty judgmental, I'll admit, but I think if I just like the person, that to me is really important. Like, I just have to be like, that's a good person, or that's someone I like, I just genuinely like. I like their values. I like who they are. I like the way they were brought up, or, all those things you look, that just make you drawn to someone. I think that's really important. So sometimes it's just that simple. Like, do you like the person?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, yes, you need to have a certain minimum amount of knowledge and all the other stuff we talked about. But a lot of times it comes down to that one thing. And if I answer no, we usually don't hire that person. In fact, every time I've gone against that and tried to hire them anyway, it usually doesn't go well. So not because of me, but just because it isn't a good cultural fit with, with the rest of the rest of the culture. So,
and I had 3 interviews when I came on. So just.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were kind of a gamble too, because, you were, like I said, you were the first more junior entry level type consultant, the first one we had hired. So it was somewhat of a gamble, and we knew it was a big deal, to bring on someone, and we wanted you to come on and make sure it's a good fit for you too. We don't want to put you in a situation where you were going to fail, weren't going to succeed. So, so here's a semi-funny question from Sam Graham, who's a frequent engagement collaborator with us. He writes guest blogs for us, and he's very active on social media with our posts and whatnot. But his question is, and hopefully you'll appreciate his humor here, but as a consultant from a military background, have you ever wished you could reach for an M16?
M4, but yes.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Thanks for that, Sam. We need a little comic relief here on a Friday.
We should get together sometime, Sam, and have a different conversation.
Yep. Sam's in Spain, so you'll have to go there, or he'll have to come to Illinois, where you're based.
I can go to Spain. That's fine.
There's worse places to go for sure. Here's an interesting question. I wasn't planning on getting into this, but it's an interesting question from Albert on LinkedIn. And let me preface this by saying at third stage, we have both, as we've grown, we started off with mostly contractors, when we first started the company. And then as we've grown, we've sort of done more of a hybrid where we have some W-2 employees, and we also have contractors as well. But the question from Albert is, I think contractors are more in demand as companies no longer want to pay for benefits for long-term full-time employees. So I guess, it's more of a comment statement, I guess. And I would sort of agree with that. although I'd say we're doing the opposite. I mean, we're sort of shifting our mix to be, uh, we're not quite 50-50 yet, but our vision is to get to more of like a even balance between employees and contractors. And even the contractors we hire, we treat them the same as employees. And lately I can't even keep track of who's who's a contractor and who's not. I don't know. I don't know
Yep.
in many cases who they are, but or what role they are. But I guess the question is, how has that worked? How have you seen that work in our company? The mix of employees, contractors. Do you see pros and cons to, from your perspective, maybe not so much from the company perspective, because I value both. I see the benefits of both
Yeah.
contractors and employees. What has your observation been along those lines?
Honestly, for me, and yes, I'm contractor, but that doesn't change my viewpoint of working for Third Stage. I am Third Stage. I'm a company man, even though I'm paid contract. That's fine by me. I have other ways to get healthcare benefits and things like that. So I've set myself in a good place. I don't contract with other companies. And honestly, I think with the individuals we have, a lot of, first off, I can't tell the difference between W-2 or contractor at all. I never know unless I just ask, minus the few that I know. But I believe most of them, if not all of them, are actually just contracting for Third Stage. And I think they're very set on our vision and our goals, and we get a good set of projects that resonate well with what they want to do. So, you could probably consider other organizations treating contractors as numbers, but not here. We're very well valued as a team, and the things that our ideas and our thoughts to process and how we do things internally are heard and listened to from all individuals in the team. So I value that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I don't know if that's true for other companies. Quite honestly, I know for a lot of companies, a lot of the bigger companies will hire very specific contract roles, like for one project or whatever. Our contractors tend to be involved in multiple projects, and we have some clients where it's fully dedicated, full-time role or whatever, longer term. But a lot of them are kind of a mix. So it's a good variety. Back to your point earlier about the constantly learning and getting new experiences and whatnot. So one last question, and then we'll wrap up. I didn't realize it's already been almost an hour. Time flies when you're talking about fun stuff like consulting careers. But another question from Albert on LinkedIn is my observation with the accelerated technology in the past 6 years. It's a very specific number, by the way, Albert. 6 years. Accelerated technology in the last 6 years is that if you don't move on via contracting, your skills become obsolete. So I find that interesting. Maybe you could talk a little bit about just your skills and how do you keep your skills fresh, or what are some of the things you found, or what do you do?
The projects we're in are so dynamic, and you're right. I think technology is constantly shifting and changing. So to keep up with that is to be well read. So constantly reading, constantly learning. I always lean on team members, whether new or experienced. Everybody, there's so many different projects happening at the same time that I think it's important to get the lessons learned from others. Talk about, when we specifically look at selection projects, for instance, the different vendors that we're seeing in all the different industries. If you know individuals that have been focused in specific clients, that would help getting their information and knowledge from that. And then you always have to be educating yourself. And I think this comes with being a good consultant, is that as you're assessing and helping a company through a project, if there's something you don't know, you need to go find out. And so putting in the extra time to do so.
Yeah. Gets back to what you were saying earlier about, asking lots of questions and being resourceful and working with the team and all that good stuff. I think the minute you stop doing that stuff, even if you feel like you don't have to anymore because you've gained enough experience or you're smart enough or whatever, I think you're sort of doomed from a consulting perspective, because you're going to stop learning. You're just going to stop, you're losing that curiosity. You're losing that humble nature. You're losing that constant learning that you should be doing as a consultant, because things are not just technology, by the way, it's business is changing, business models, operations, change management, and it's all changing. I mean, there's nothing about what we do that stays. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Well, thanks for being here today, Cameron. This was a super insightful conversation. I always love talking to you, not just in the work setting, talking about clients and stuff like that, but just more generally about careers. I think this is really fascinating. So I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. Thanks everybody for the questions, and thanks for not throwing me too big of zingers. Maybe next time, but yeah, always happy to be a part of it. And thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to the audience. I'll second that. Thanks for the great questions, and thanks for listening in. You can find this interview in our Transformation Ground Control podcast episode that's going to be released in approximately 2 weeks. In a week from Wednesday of next week, it'll be released. So look for that. Be sure to subscribe to it on YouTube. You can also subscribe to Transformation Ground Control podcast on all the usual podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify, Google Podcasts, all those usual suspects. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Cam. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Bye.